So I was kind of nervous to do a Zoom meeting, but I was chosen, so I prayed on it quite a bit. But starting off the presentation, I really have to take a moment to honor um, the residential school survivors and those that haven't made it home yet, and we're still in counting. I think over 7,000 have come back home from the residential schools. So, in honor of them, I want to read a poem from a residential school survivor. She's from Nova Scotia. She's passed on, so it's late Rita Jo. She's a Mi'kmaq poet. So this is going to help understand maybe a little bit of where we came from and where we're going. Okay. So I lost my talk, the talk you took away when I was a little girl at Shubenacadie School. You snatched it away. I speak like you. I think like you. I create like you. The scrambled ballads about my world. Two ways I talk, both ways I say. Your way is more powerful. So gently, I offer my hand and ask, let me find my talk so I can teach you about me. So every teacher, principal, or anybody that wants to learn about us, I always remember to tell them that number one, you want to know about First Nation peoples, you really have to relationship build. If you come into our schools, because it's a beautiful paycheck and you get all kinds of benefits for working in Cree territory, I'll notice. And the children will notice. So that's when you're going to start getting behavior problems. So you have to understand that you're coming into a community. Most of our communities, there's residential school survivors. So there's intergenerational trauma and there's dysfunction. And a lot of our students are high risk. And I was the same way. I was raised in foster care and I was an ESL learner. So Mi'kmaq was my first language. Then they switched me to French and then I went to English. And then I had some wonderful teachers that took the time to get to know me. I was a figure skater, so they would reel me in that way. When I was quiet, they let me be because they knew I was in foster care. So relationship building is a big thing. That's before we start the academics, August, September, start relationship building. Get to know your students. Get to know their likes, their dislikes, and get to know their norms. Where do they feel comfortable? One thing we're taught is never to stare. Those are our First Nation ways. But I remember as a little student, a teacher saying, do you understand me? And I look at them. And then I look down because I really didn't. I didn't understand English fluently. Look at me. And I'd look down. You're not listening. I'm going to send you to the principal. I said, I looked down. Then she'd raise look at me. And it's so embarrassing when someone does that to you because you know what? My grandmother taught me don't stare. All my growing up, she said, Lisa, bunik siya kami. Stop staring at me. But then a teacher's telling me, look at me. And it was, so that relationship breaks right away with the teacher. Then I start saying, this teacher is going against my grandmother. Trust. You really need to gain a First Nation student's trust. And trust is not, it's really earned. And I tell my teachers that you have to earn their trust. Yes, it's about academics, but if you want a First Nation student to work, you really have to, number one, relationship build, make sure they trust you, build their confidence. Because a lot are coming in from broken homes without confidence. Our parents don't promote education because of their experience with the residential schools. So this is where the teacher really has to engage with your students and make sure that your environment is safe. It's a safe place. Sometimes students come in, they're tired. So if you see a tired student, don't go at them. Give them time. But in private, say, are you okay? Ask if their basic needs are met, if they had breakfast, if they're thirsty. Say, that's okay. That's between you and I. If you want a little snack, I have something in my drawer. And if you notice, even at the elementary level, that you see it every day, about 7 haven't eaten breakfast. I moved to the north in Shisasabi, and you know what I did? I bought a bunch of cereal, fed them. It wasn't a big deal. I use those cups, they get free milk. I put the milk in, and guess what happened? I've met one of their basic needs. Then I give them milk, they're second. They feel safe in my classroom. So then learning starts to happen. And when I feel like they trust me and they have clear rules of my expectations, you have to be respectful, because that's Gookum's teachings. That's our grandparents' teaching. Be respectful. They didn't send you to school to come here to give me a hard time, because I know I could call your Gookum and she'll tell me, oh no, sorry, I'm going to bring them in and they're going to apologize. A lot of us come from dysfunctional homes, so I always mention the Gookum and the Jumshum, the grandfather and the grandmother, because a lot of times we still have good relationships with our grandparents. Sometimes the relationship with our parents are broken. So if it's broken, you can mention their parents, and if they're out drinking, they won't care, the kids. They'll say, I don't care, call them. But if I say you're Gookum, no, don't tell her. Don't. I'll be okay. I'll be all right. Don't say anything. And to be non-judgmental. Okay. We're First Nation, so we kind of have, I call the 6 senses. If you don't like me because you've seen my dark hair and the color of my skin, I'm gonna know, like right off the bat. I remember going into Shisasabi and one of the teachers saying, oh, are you the new TA here? Making assumptions. I'm like, no, I'm actually on a break. I was a principal in the Gaspésie and I needed a break, and I always wanted to teach in the north. So now's my chance. I don't need a beautiful resume anymore. I've been a director, a teacher, I said a principal. So now I'm doing what I want to do. I think to be an effective principal, I have to go back into the classroom because things changed. From 1993, the students there was no technology, so that changed. So I needed to know what's going on in the classroom again. So I went back into the classroom. Wow, there's lots of anger. And that's not from just the parents. These video games, cell phones, language loss, and just stuff like that. So You really have to get to know, I always say, they're our clients, right? That's our job as educators, to make sure we get to know them. But magic will happen once they know that you've met their basic needs. The student that was quiet will trust you and speak because they trust you as an adult. Love. Love is so powerful. You show us love, we'll grow. Truth, be honest. Honesty, courage. Give them courage. Tell them you'll be able to read that book. Watch. You're just starting my class, but you feel like you can't read now, but I'm here to teach you how to read. And you'll see. You'll know what an author is. You're going to know what an illustrator is. Maybe those are new words to you because you speak Cree or you speak Mi'kmaq. Make sure you allow them to share your wisdom, the wisdom they know. And I always tell First Nation students that, we're hunters, we fish. And here in Cree territory, there's so many hunters. But you guys are experts in the woods. You may be 15 years old, but I'm sure one of the non-native teachers would love to get lost in the woods with you because you'd know how to survive. Not everybody has those skills. So become interested in them and their ways. Don't come into our communities and always push your ways on us because it's not going to work. I know it's not going to work. I've been teaching since 1993. So I might not have my PhD. Yes, I have 3 degrees, but I always say I'm a doctor of my own culture. I know I've raised children. My daughter's 32 years old. She's working on her MED. She's been teaching for 8 years. And I'm not a miracle mother, but I gave my daughter structure and the basic needs and to stay clean from alcohol and drugs because that's our reality. You have to know our reality before you start working with us. There is a high rate of alcoholism, suicide, drug abuse. It's there. Coming into our communities and you're pretending it's not there, it's not going to help you. Because again, you have to nurture that broken child. You become everything to them. And you can't give them mixed messages. One day you're nice, the other day, you can't do that. You have to be consistent with your messages. Because as a student in high school, okay, one teacher told me that, man, you're smart. Look, I told you to write a paper in 10 minutes and you wrote it and you had 90%. But then my French teacher, and I was all in high levels, and my French teacher, I asked her, what's the difference between me, te, de, and when do I use ta, ma, like in French? He looks at me and he says, why do you go on that bus every morning? What? And he said, why do you go on that bus every morning? He said, you're going to be just like the others. You're going to get pregnant. You're going to have lots of kids. You're going to be stuck on the reserve just like everyone else. Okay, really? Thanks for letting me know. Because Miss Long over here that teaches me English tells me that I'm smart. Anyway, I ended up quitting school, getting pregnant, just like what he said. But then I started working in a treatment center and I didn't want to do that all my life. So I went back to school, finished my high school. No, not the conventional way, but my way. Ended up getting a few degrees. And I still, to this day, I'm a principal. Working on my MED. I still have to give them my job description to have respect or to honor who I am. So even to do this workshop, confidence. Build those little beings' confidence. Don't rip them down because it lasts for a lifetime. But if you give them confidence, I remember all the teachers that gave me confidence that said, wow, you're so cute, you're so smart. Wow, you picked up English fast. You know, those are the teachers I remember. But Mr. Sear, on the other hand, that said I don't belong in your system, you know what? Miss Long kind of balanced him out. She was the one that said I was smart. He just lit me on fire. And here I am today, still teaching educators, my teachers, and talking to students, telling them, you know, you're able to. They look at me, you don't know what you're talking about. You have it all. You drive a BMW. Oh yeah, you have nice clothes. Look at me. I said, that was me. You were me. I was a foster child. I was broken. And you know what? I turned 18 and then I started driving my car. I didn't put up with anyone drinking in my house, fighting, and all the dysfunction wasn't allowed in my life, in my bubble. And you can do that. You're smart enough to. What? You were in foster care? Yeah, I was in foster care. I seen drinking. I seen everything that needed to be seen, at a young age. And I suffered from anxiety. And I said, but there was some teachers that had hearts that planted the seeds in me. But I never had a First Nation teacher, educator. It was all non-natives. So now you guys are lucky. The Cree or any nation these days, there's First Nation teachers in the schools. Like here, they can speak their language freely. Nobody's getting upset with them or trying to figure out what they're saying. They're allowed. So let them be them. And if you need to tap in a quiet student, get a speaker and let that child be your translator until that child trusts you. Because sometimes when we speak from our heart, it's in our language. And it's easier. Like right now, I'm speaking, but I'm translating from my language to English, or I speak French, and I'm starting to speak Cree, Saiban, so it's amazing. So I have many languages in my head. So now it's going to bring me to the part of the learning styles. Visual. You have to be visual. Visual starts from home. My mom was a basket maker, so she made me watch her, but I couldn't disturb her. She would do the, and she'd say, "No, watch what I'm doing." So I tried, and I didn't know how to do it. I said, she'd be like, "You're not watching enough. Now sit there and watch what I'm doing." Anyway, so she'd start the bottom, and she taught me patience because I wasn't allowed to touch a basket again until I had confidence to do it. And we're visual learners. We're auditory to oral. Um, that starts at a young age with storytelling, from our grandparents. So it's easier sometimes for us to sit there and actually just listen to. And we're tactile, so we need to feel. So you'll think they're doodling, and they're probably doodling, but they're listening at the same time. Don't shun out a student that's doodling and saying, "Are you listening?" He's listening, but he needs to touch too, the kinesthetic mover too. Kinesthetic is such a big learning style that a lot of teachers can't grasp. I think it's because we come from westernized teachings, okay? This is where I promote my teachers to go outside. Land-based learning. I'm like, guys, get outside. There's teaching that can go in between you and your student. You don't have to stay in the classroom all the time. Let them teach you. It's all about relationship building. Ask them what they think about fall. You know, they can tell you things. Bring them to the river and ask about erosion. They can explain that in their own words. You want them to write. Go outside and get them to write things that you visually saw, like that you've seen outside. And again, we're all lifelong learners. So I am hoping that you take the time to listen to your First Nation student that sits there quietly. Use his peers to get to them. I'm fortunate to be in Waskaganish. Waskaganish, the parent involvement is amazing. I've never seen a school like this in almost the entire time of my career in education. Get in contact with the parents, involve the parents. And if you can involve the parents, involve the grandparents. And that will show the extended family that you care. Because when we know that you care, we'll be behind you 100%. But again, remember we have six senses. If you don't care, the gookum will pick it up, the grandfather will pick it up, the mother. So just be careful. I'm from the Gaspésie, the beautiful part of the world, I say. Um, so Gaspésia is actually the total opposite of here, but in Quebec. So the Mi'kmaq, our territories from New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, PEI, Newfoundland. So our territory runs pretty, it's pretty big. And I think there's some Mi'kmaq speakers in this conference, but where I'm from, it's a very small community. And we hunt, we fish, and our language is, we're losing our language, which is not a good thing. English has kind of taken over. My generation is almost one of the last speakers, and I really think it was just through assimilation. Um, if your child didn't learn Mi'kmaq, then they'd speak well in um, English. So I'm still a speaker, so you'll hear my accent, and that that's one of my things as a person or educator. I'm very careful. You have to understand that in our languages, there's no THs. So I have to learn your talk. I have to think about how I'm going to pronounce things because we don't have all the letters. So when I go home, I always speak lazy because I'm around my family. I'm like, oh, where's your mother? They're like, oh, where's your mother gone? Like, it's just natural when we're home. But when I go back to any university course, so Lisa, you went home for the summer? I said, yeah, why? Because your accent always changes. It's because I have to relearn your talk. And I remember a teacher pointing that out, saying in grade 7, Lisa, can you count 1, 2, 3? In front of everybody too, not tree, 3. You see my tongue, and I can still even visualize her. 3. I said 1, 2, 3. I said, you still understand it if I say tree or 3. I said, tree is not normal, is normal to me, but 3 and sticking my tongue out is probably going to get me in trouble when I go home because we don't speak like that. And she'd always point that out to me, and that's not a good way to build relationships with students either. Go ahead, Simon.
And where did you go to school? When you say this teacher told me to do it this way, and when I go home, I might get in trouble.
I went to school at Richmond High School, so it was all non-native. We had no First Nation teachers, so that was in Richmond, Quebec. And then I went off to Bonaventure Polyvalent. So it's not always easy, eh? Like the acceptance. I remember when I was in high school, the French and English fought a lot. So we had double whammies. We were English speakers, plus we were First Nation. And I don't know, it was like difficult for the students to be accepted. And as a First Nation person too, you go through an identity crisis at some point. That I remember in grade 7 wanting to be white, thinking, oh, if I was white, they probably don't drink, they go on vacation, but I hear them going on vacation and I don't. And so you go through an identity crisis and you kind of push away from your language too. I remember not wanting to speak, and I'd come home speaking English. And mama was like a residential school survivor, so she always pushed my language on me, and she'd be like, Inuit, are you native? Eh, Inuisi. And she'd tell me, speak Mi'kmaq. When you come in this house, no more English. Mugalasie. And I used to tell her, but mom, I'm trying to practice to speak like them. And no, not here. What happens at the school stays at the school. What happened? Like they weren't together. You know what I mean? She didn't want to know what was happening at the school. And so she didn't really care. I don't even think she went to one parent meeting. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to remind folks that this will bring us to about 4 minutes of your time. And I just wanted to, you said you wanted to, have people ask questions, give you the heads up. And if you do have any questions, just chime in, take yourself off camera if you can, and ask away. Thank you.
Well, Alan Simon.
Yeah, you can go for it and finish your that important lesson. I know how that feels. In terms of different expectations and having sheer confusion sometimes, right?
Oh, it's very confusing between um, home life and school life. So what happens is, say for my home, there was a lot of dysfunction, so I would hide that. You know, no, nobody was allowed to come visit at my house, and they really didn't want me to go visit outside unless it was another First Nation family. But otherwise, you kind of kept things a secret, and I still see that happening these days. Like you don't want youth protection in your homes and stuff. You don't want to be taken away from your family. So they say, why do children hide it? It's just, it's sometimes you don't even know it's wrong. When you live in dysfunction, you're raised that way. So that affects students as well when they come into the classroom or into my office. And I find, even when I talk about most of the reports that come in from teachers, most of them are academic based. 90% of them is they don't understand and they're too shy to ask the teacher. The teacher hasn't reached out to them saying, okay, I have some time after school, can you meet me, or do things in private. It's already difficult enough to say I don't speak well in English, or I have a hard time in English or math, because the parental support sometimes is not there to push them. So um, it's all and every teacher that comes in here, I said, you really need to relationship build. You keep sending the students to me. I have amazing relationships with all these students now, and you're still writing them up. You're still writing them up because you haven't initiated that relationship. So you're struggling with your classroom management with them but you really need to talk to them and explain your expectations and you're trustworthy.
Thank you very much. And how do you say thank you in Waskaganish?
Jemskundan in Shisasabi, but in my language is Welalin.
Wilalin.
Welalin, merci.
And in Waskaganish, how do you say thank you?
I don't know Waskaganish. I know only in Shisasabi. I've been here for a year now, so
Oh,
Jemskundan. How do you say thank you in out west?
Plains Cree, they say hi, hi. Manitoba Cree, common is egusane. Where I come from, we say tinige.
Oh,
And
here
we
in
all,
Miigwech.
Megwech, yeah, we all say kinana skumitin. You know, I love languages and I do want to say thank you. And I'm going to take you up on your offer. You said 15 hours for Moroa?
It's about 12 hours, yeah. 12.
I'll go for a cup of coffee.
You come, you're always welcome, and I'll show you the whole community. It's beautiful here, Simon.
Miigwech.
And it comes from the heart always. Take care.
And Dr. Daphne Mai'Stoina has a presentation. Of course, it's called Transforming First Nations Education, Journey to Establishing a First Nations Education Authority. She is a superintendent of education for Waskaganish Tribal Council. For those of you that speak Cree, it means our territory or our land, Waskaganish. And she has been in education system for 30 years, serving in various capacities such as a special education teacher, vice principal, acting principal, assistant superintendent, superintendent, and province-wide special education director for the province of, I'm going to assume, Alberta. She is originally from Siksika, okay, and has cultural ties with Siksika traditions. Daphne has a master's degree in educational leadership administration, University of San Diego, and a doctorate of education, University of Calgary. She has served on various regional, provincial, and national education bodies representing First Nations over the years. Daphne has presented at local, provincial, national, and international conferences on topics that include special education, Indian control of Indian education, and inequities in First Nations education. She has received numerous awards and recognition for achievements, including Dr. Olive Dickinson Award. She has been blessed with 3 beautiful children, 7 grandchildren that make her life complete. So with that introduction, I just want to remind folks, if you can put your microphones on mute. And so we'll ask our special presenter today. Again, thank you, Wilalin, Lisa, Dr. Daphne. You let us know when would be a good time to ask any questions. So you take it away. Thank you.
Awesome. First of all, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? You can?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, for my apologies. I'm just back from holidays, and I think I got the time slot a little mixed up here, being from the West. So again, my apologies to everyone that's on. Thank you, Lisa. Excellent presentation. It's so good to hear from different parts of our territories on what is the landscape, what is the history, and it's just so good to hear that. First of all, I'd just like to greet you. Good afternoon, everyone. My traditional name is Sibutusaki, but I am known as Daphne, and I am from Siksika, but I do currently work with Waskaganish Tribal Council, and we have a number of slides we want to share with you, our journey in education and how we came to be. It's an exciting journey, and we're just so pleased to be able to present to you our journey. And I have some of my staff actually on this presentation. So at some point, maybe if anybody has any questions specific to a certain area, I'll certainly be calling them on just to provide additional information. So with that, can we just go to the next slide? So Wetaskiwin Tribal Council is comprised of 5 First Nations: Loon River, Lubicon, Peerless Trout, Whitefish Lake, Woodland Cree. And so this tribal council has been in existence for quite a while. And before we became an authority, we did have education services that included providing some advice and assistance to the band operated schools in these nations, tuition and education service agreements. We did have a partnership with Northland School Division, and that was for shared second level services with 10 schools. 6 were First Nations and 4 were on Métis settlements. So just to give you an idea of where we're located at, you can see the territory. It is quite expansive. You can see the Peerless Trout and Peerless Lake and Trout Lake are our northern most northern First Nation. And then to the west is Cadott and Little Buffalo. Central is Loon River, and that's where our offices are currently located. And south is Atikamekw, which is our largest First Nation. And we cover approximately 8,200 square miles in Northwest Alberta. And so you can see that on the Alberta map, the territory that we do cover. So in 2015, Wetaskiwin Tribal Council established an education committee, and that's actually when I kind of came into the picture. And at that time, they had just decided that they wanted to pursue having an authority. And what they were looking at was how are we going to be governed? How are we going to be able to serve from an administrative perspective? How are we going to be able to run this organization? So they developed a work plan, and it was two leadership from each of the First Nations that were part of this education committee. So it was comprised of 10 committee members, and and in the work plan, we developed a governance structure, an administrative structure, and then we became incorporated as a legal entity, and we engaged with the community. These were the first steps that we took towards the establishment, and this took a number of years to do that community engagement, and we continue to this day. A big part of what we do is community engagement. So we did work with the province. The province were actually the ones, the education, Alberta Education was the ones that came forward and wanted to provide assistance in this regard in providing this authority. They saw the relevance of it. They wanted to support it. Previous to that, there was always issues of how much support we got from the province. And so this was actually a good venture where we actually teamed up with them, and they provided us with some assistance with some other staff, and we worked together. So this we signed a framework agreement with the government in February of 2016. And this was a letter of intent that was first signed, and then through that, a framework agreement was signed. And this was to also include, it was a 10-year agreement, and it included provincial enhancement funding to assist in the establishment and the implementation of KTCEA. And the agreement also included a lot of in-kind supports, which we've used over the years and we continue to use. And the framework agreement with the government of Alberta helped to pave the way for a federal agreement. So we signed this agreement, and then through that we ended up going meeting with the government of Canada, and we ended up signing the REA, which I'll talk about in a minute. Through this agreement, Alberta committed to enhancement, and this is not replacing any kind of funding. It was just more an enhancement dollars, and we had set some priorities as to what we wanted to work on, and they were going to assist us in that regard. Next slide. So in 2017 and 18, KTCA was established as a legal entity, and we eventually took over the administration initially of 3 band-operated schools, and these were Clarence J. Cox, Cadott Lake, and Attigamik schools. And then the following year, 2018-19, we took over the administration of the 3 remaining First Nation schools, Little Buffalo, Peerless Lake, and Kateri. Since then, KTC has provided kindergarten to grade 12 education for approximately 1,100 students located in the First Nations. And I just want to say that the communities we serve are semi-remote, and they are very far removed from any kind of services, adequate second-level services, very much in isolation. So the coming together as an authority made sense in terms of economies of scale, and I think that's kind of how we continue to operate, ensuring that they're getting quality services that they normally would not have been able to get just in terms of operating as a single entity. So in this, the leadership have been the ones that played a strong role. So you can see in this picture, this is when we signed the REA, and these are the chiefs of the 5 First Nations. And they have remained adamant on creating our own system and ensuring that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People was front and center in the negotiations with the federal government, particularly Article 14, which states that Indigenous people have the right to establish and control their education systems and institutions, providing education in their own languages in a manner appropriate to their cultural methods of teaching and learning. So the formal signing of this REA took place July 18th, 2019 at the Woodland Cree First Nation. And I believe it was the first one signed in Canada. A new federal government funding formula was applied and was based on the provincial funding framework with specific adaptations for the KTCA to consider remote, northern, and linguistic factors. So what is an REA? And you'll probably see some of this in some of the publications on the ISK, the government websites. But what it is a vehicle for more flexible and equitable funding model to better support the K-12 students. It acknowledges the continued discussions that are needed in other areas that warrant additional federal funding, which we still are in discussions. We do meet with them on a regular basis, and it defines the roles and responsibilities of KTCEA, KTC, the Tribal Council, and Canada. The REA, the Regional Education Agreement, does not describe every aspect of the funding model, nor does it describe specific initiatives that KTCA may want to undertake. And the REA does not deal with post-secondary, nor is it a self-government agreement. So that's what it is and what it isn't. So the KTCA member nations believe that through the REA, Canada can take steps to uphold the spirit and intent of our treaty right to education by properly funding an education system led and controlled by our First Nation communities that is based on the Nihiyoan values and beliefs. Through this process, we repatriated schools that were previously operated and governed by a provincial school board. In the REA, education was pulled out of the KTCA multi-year agreement and funded separately. So previously, the funding would come to KTC and then dispersed to the First Nations. And what they did was they pulled that education portion of that funding and then they funded it separately to KTCEA. Funding is provided from Canada to the KTCA Tribal Council, then to KTCA through a sub-agreement without any administrative fees. So we wanted to make sure that there was no, that administrative piece being taken away and not spent on education. So a new federal funding formula was applied based on a provincial funding framework with specific adaptations for KTCA to consider northern, remote, and linguistic factors. The REA emphasized the importance of reporting to the community annually. The community report that is developed is a single report that's provided to community, Alberta, and Canada. So previous to this, there was always these reports we had to fill out. As you know, as educators, we always have to do all these different reports for specific programs, targeted programs. There was numerous reports. So the red tape was huge as an individual First Nation, or even as multiple First Nations. But what we ended up with our REA was that there was going to be a single reporting back, and it was only reporting back to the community. It was a report, and then that report would then be utilized for any agreements we had with the ISK and also with Alberta Education. The REA includes a clause on the REA over ISK policies and guidelines. The opener clauses are to continue discussions on potential further funding enhancements and third level services. So there are clauses in there that we insisted that they be in there to ensure that we would have further discussion. So it wasn't tied just to what was indicated in there, that there would be opportunities to have further funding enhancements and third level services. Like many First Nations across the country, we continue to be in discussions and negotiations with the federal government on things like the operation and maintenance and transportation funding. As you know, as educators, there is a lot of discrepancy in those two areas. So this slide kind of demonstrates the complexity of education prior to the creation of KTCA. We had multiple service providers providing multiple services to students. This created confusion, inequities, and inconsistencies between our schools. For example, a principal in one school would not know which service was available to them and who to contact. Some schools had access to very limited services and resources. So you can see how it was all, there was just levels of services from the Treaty 8 area, from Northland School Division, from KTC, the Tribal Council, from the individual First Nations. So there wasn't a lot of complexity in this. With the creation of the Education Authority came many benefits for students and communities. A stronger organizational structure and governance structure that's led and controlled by the First Nations was created to better support each of the schools and students. It created an economy of scale that opened up many new services and supports to students. With this model, we have centralized finance, IT, transportation, operation and maintenance, and HR, among others. Collectively, this results in a huge cost savings that can then be invested in better supporting our students, including second level services. And we'll go over our second level supports in greater detail in a little later in this presentation. So the board of in terms of governance, KTCA is governed by a board of directors composed of representative members from each of the five KTCEA First Nation communities. The board is comprised of three representatives from the five First Nations, chief and 2 councillors, for a total of a 15-member board. The board is guided by a governance policy manual, which provides direction to the board, the superintendent, and the staff. To ensure strength in our governance, a board mentor was hired when the Education Authority was first formed in and continues to provide that guidance to this day. And he is a former trustee that's had many years of experience working in First Nations and the provincial school jurisdictions. KTCA also receives guidance and oversight from KTC, the Tribal Council. The governance structure is designed to ensure that each nation can have the benefits that come from a single education authority while ensuring that each nation continues to have local autonomy. So in 2019, in the summer of 2019, the KTCA Board of Directors approved a 5-year a multi-year strategic plan, which defines the direction, the goals, and the priorities for this organization. The vision and mission and values of KTCA were developed as part of the strategic plan, a summary of which is provided in the slide above. Our collective vision is excellence in Indigenous education. And then our 5 core priorities, which were set by the board within the plan, are centered around student success, governance, staff retention, assets, and partnerships. KTCEA puts a high priority on what we call training our own, hiring our own, and retaining the best. So we built a entire strategy around ensuring we can build up the capacity of our First Nations to progressively take on more senior roles. This includes fully supporting EAs to get their education degrees to become certified teachers, supporting teachers to get their master's degrees, and providing dedicated mentoring and succession planning for central office staff in key roles. One of the earliest benefits we saw after creating the Education Authority was the immediate change in our ability to recruit and retain teachers in our remote communities. In 2017, we had a 38% retention rate for staff. This is when we first took over. In 2019-20, this retention rate was 91%. So you can see with all of the stability we built around our schools, we were able to retain our teachers. And one of the things that you'll see, and you'll see them in these slides, if you can see in the background, the outline of trees, land-based learning and Cree language are KTCEA cornerstones. And they are in everything that we do. And you'll see that in a lot of what we we're in our second level services. The KTCA Elder Speak app was released in January 2020. We were very aggressive in ensuring that we have elders, and I believe we had 60 elders that participated in the building of this app. And it's a teaching tool for the Cree language and features elders from each First Nation speaking Cree. We know that our strength is in the richness of the land and the uniqueness of our language, history, and identity. The KTCA First Nations are still very much entrenched in living off the land. They're still hunters, trappers. They're still very much part and parcel of what they do on an everyday basis. So working closely with members of the community, our commitment is to ensure that traditional teachings are nurtured so that the students know who they are and have pride in who they are. KTCA students have access to Cree language instruction. This ensures that the preservation of Cree language and increase in language proficiency. KTCA provides land-based learning programs and outdoor experiences that incorporate and transfer Cree language, beliefs, attitudes, and skills. Some of the teachings include trapping and skinning, hunting, traditional meal preparation, snowshoeing, and dog sledding. This year, we hired a Cree language strategic specialist to incorporate Cree language throughout the organization, including central office. So we've elevated that Cree language to be right at the superintendent office to oversee everything that's happening in education to ensure that the language is part and parcel of what we do. We use land-based learning through our education programs and offer camps, video lessons, and challenges. So prior to COVID, we were running camps every month for grades, right from grades 1 to 12. We do have a land-based learning campsite at Lubicon Lake Band that was developed by Lubicon Band leadership for KTCA schools to access. Additional camps in other nations are also being developed. The photo here shows an example of resources we have developed to use with land-based learning for language development. We created 3 land-based learning how-to videos and books on how to set up a teepee, how to ride a horse, and how to dog sled. The videos and books are in Cree and English and help students learn to structure and tell a story in sequence, orally, and then in structured writing guide and final written assignment. And this was done in conjunction with a speech and language pathologist who helped to develop these, because we do know that speech language is something speech language needs are great in some of our communities. So I'm going to share a video with you about our land-based learning camps. It was filmed in fall 2020.
KTCEA has been offering these camps now for 8 years. We're just going into our 9th year of offering the camps. And we started out with 1 camp per year, and we're now at the point where we are comfortably doing 13 camps per year.
The land-based learning camp has always been part of our Indigenous communities. It is a way to connect back to the land. And the students get an opportunity to experience learning through nature and science in the natural environment out on the land.
There was a lot of cultural aspects that were being lost, the language, the traditional land use. So in discussions with our elders, our leadership, it was decided that we needed to go back to a traditional way of learning for our kids.
It was to motivate students, because they were the attendance was really low, and we thought if we did something fun that they would show up, and it has been successful in that way. I think it promotes critical thinking skills. It's in a stress-free environment. They have the opportunity to do their own fun stuff that they really want to do.
In a conventional classroom, what we've been experiencing with our students is they come with a lot of socioeconomic issues, they come with emotional issues, defiance, and we find that when we get those kids out here at camp, a lot of those issues we're not seeing displayed as much as they are in the conventional classroom. What we find is our kids are very excited about the learning, they're enthusiastic, and a lot of that comes from that sense of ownership and pride that this is their traditional teachings, this is something that they've done for generations in their nations, so it brings out that sense of pride and ownership.
We'd like to eventually have the KTC curriculum that's going to be land-based learning, and it's going to tie to all of the subject areas within the Alberta curriculum.
One of the greatest things that we've seen come out of the camps is that sense of leadership and confidence that we've instilled in those students, where we've seen them grow into becoming young adults who are willing to take a leadership role and who are willing to share their traditional knowledge. As KTCEA has developed a strong land-based learning program, and what we're seeing now is a building interest not only in our Treaty 8 country, but throughout Canada, where people are becoming more and more interested in what we're doing, looking for guidance, and we're always welcome anybody to come out and learn from us. More importantly, learn with us, because as the Hiawak, as Cree people, we are always about sharing knowledge with one another, and that doesn't matter where you come from.
Yes, and I think we really and they come out and stay out on the land for 5 days. So they come out, and we do have a lot of support from each of the First Nations, depending on the camps, and we utilize a lot of the traditional the knowledge keepers in each of those nations. So it is well received by all. So I just want to go over is a really good video that was produced by some of our staff, and I'm really proud of the work that they've done. in ensuring we're sharing some of what we've been doing. So in terms of second level services, we really worked on developing a lot in regards to First Nations driven common and consistent curriculum. We gathered teachers and elders, and this is the second summer where they worked on developing a curriculum that's based on treaty education, First Nations history, and residential school history for all grade levels. Prior to the creation of the Education Authority and the REA, second level services were very limited because of the funding was inadequate. The funding we now have allows us to have an extensive second level services that address the needs of our students more fully in areas such as literacy, numeracy, sports programming. And I just want to say, in regards to sports programming, that was, it also went viral. We were featured in many stories because these kids don't have access to organized sports or to be able to be part of a league of any sort. So having them developing our own sports programming, tournaments, to having students identify, you know, I represent my school. There was a real strong school spirit developed. They really worked on their emblems and on their school their logos and so on to reflect that they were very much proud of that, and they were buying all of the sweatshirts and everything, and just really developed that school spirit. A lot of good work in that, and likewise in all of the other areas, they've all excelled in ensuring that we provided the highest quality services. We do have in our nutrition program, we are serving traditional foods, early childhood education, mental health. We have a mental health therapist in each of the schools. We have career and technology studies. Speech and language programs are also listed on this slide. Every one of these second level services must embrace the values of the First Nations communities and must be responsive to the communities we serve. With the creation of the authority, we have centralized supports and finance. We do use a Cree, which 40% of school districts use. It's a Cree financial system that we acquired. IT, every single student has either some device of some sort. Transportation, we've been able to replace most of the buses. Operation and maintenance, we have we've developed a plan. We did a feasibility study, and we've got the commitment of ISK to fund that over a period of time on each of the priorities for the facilities. And HR is again very active in looking at developing capacity, because one of the things we know is in the remote areas, it's harder to attract teachers. So we're looking at how can we develop local capacity to ensure that there's stability in those schools for all the staff. So currently we oversee 6 schools located in 5 First Nations. Our total population currently is 1,130. Our smallest school has 103 students, and the largest school has 305 students. This September, we added a new KTCEA outreach school to serve KTCA students in all KTC nations. The first site opened last month in Atikamekw and will be expanding to locations for each First Nation in the future years as the sites are identified. The goal is to provide an alternative education setting for students who are not achieving in a conventional school, students that are not in school, and or students who wish to upgrade and complete high school courses. So as you know, in First Nations, we do have a high dropout rate. When we took over, we knew that we needed to try to attract these students back, and so the outreach school has been something we've been working on in the last year in getting this done. So like I mentioned, we do one report, the KTC community report. So you can see this is the one that we are just going, it's just been done. It's going to be up for final approval with our board. And then we will have a series of engagement sessions with the community and reporting back to the community on what we've accomplished in the last year based on the priorities that were set by the board. And as mentioned, it's a single report that KTC provides. Our first priority is to the community, back to the community. So we report back to the communities, and then that report then is then utilized in the other in reporting back to Alberta and Canada. We know that clear and consistent communication with parents, teachers, elders, and leaders in our community partners is absolutely essential. The slide above shows you the cover of our current community report. And once completed, it'll be posted on our website, and you can view our 2019-20 report on our website on www.ktcea.ca. So the slide, this slide provides us a summary of our progress in 2020-21. There are also highlights that will be presented in our 2020-21 community report. Highlights include a full day K4 early learning program in 5 of our schools. In 2021, we had 26 high school grads. This is more than double from the number of grads from the previous year. We anticipate this will continue to increase. We do have a draft KTC common consistent curriculum that was developed to reflect Cree language, Cree ways of knowing and being, and land-based learning. This is being used right now in our schools. Over 20 land-based learning video lessons with Cree syllabics and subtitles were produced for use in our Google Classroom. We also held land-based learning challenges for students to complete at home. Our specialists developed strategies to help students mitigate loss from in-person school closures. As you know, last year with the pandemic, we had to have a lot of school closures. So we have developed a plan to address that. This is a challenge that many First Nations face across the country. We also developed the wellness phone line because of the isolation, because of kids not being able to be in school to be with their peers. We knew that wellness may be an issue, so we had a wellness phone line and a series of wellness videos for students, families, and staff to support mental health and well-being during the pandemic. We also published in this last year an early learning handbook and a high school handbook for the parents. We continue to hire and attract and retain the best employees. 53% of KTCA staff are from the KTCA First Nations. As mentioned, we retain a 91% retention rate for teaching staff, second year in a row. And 17 KTCA employees are enrolled in the Master's of Education Studies degree. This master's program supports hiring our own and retaining the best, and we continue to upgrade our teacherages and fleet. So we have, because of the remoteness, we have to have accommodations for teachers, and so I think we oversee 71 or maybe 77 teacherages. We did add more in the last while. We purchased more teacherages for each of the First Nations, and of course our fleet of school buses. So that is kind of in a nutshell what KTC is about and what we've done in this time period of being an authority. I know I've compressed this in, but we have we've actually there's been so much work done in so many areas, and I wish we could share a lot more of that with you. But I'm just wondering on time where am I at? Sometimes I lose track of time here.
That actually just wraps it up. That was a very good presentation in terms of timing. But we do have a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. And would we be able to go to a slide as to where to find out more information, or would they be just able to Google Kitaskino Tribal Council Education Authority?
Yes, they can go on our website. We do have a website that is regularly maintained. We do have a contact as well. We actually have done presentations to quite a number of First Nations in the country. We have been invited to do some presentations, and we've been networking, and we've always welcomed any networking opportunities. Because then we also then benefit from that, and there's sharing of information and resources. So we have been doing a number of that, a number of those kinds of presentations and meetings. So I think if anybody is interested afterwards, you know, contact Carmen. Carmen Perrant is kind of the one that oversees this for us, and she's on. I see her name there. And she can also assist.
Well, thank you very much. And anybody have any questions? And superintendent is equivalent to director of education?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. I recall my superintendent days there at Stony Education Authority, and sometimes we'd have to explain it to some folks that might be
yes.
a little bit different there. So again, thank you very much. You know, Carmen was waiting for you there. She was entertaining us very well, so she did a good job.
Awesome.
But I invite everybody to click on the next link there I provided. And Jade Ryan says she uses the app regularly, provided by KTC, and you know, phenomenal resource. So thank you so much for all the hard work, the vision, and sticking to it. For those folks that don't know the process, it's a lot of community meetings, and it's a real collective effort. So with that said, I want to remind everybody I did post and share the link if you want to just go to it for our next session. And I guess that's it. Thank you. And how do you say thank you again in Blackfoot? Siksika.
Wait, well, we say Sugapi, which is like Sugapi.
Siksika.
Yeah.
Aho.